Hey, what's up, guys? TJ here with the MMA Jackal. I just wanted to come on here today and talk about the PFL versus Bellator Champs event that took place yesterday. So, this was announced a few months back, and originally I was really excited for it. I want the UFC to have competition. I am a fan of the UFC, but more so, I'm a fan of MMA, which I think most of us are, right? I'm a fan of combat sports and combat athletes, and I want them to have the most opportunity possible to succeed. And in a world with multiple high level organizations that all compete against each other, you know, that's just a world more conducive to a healthier MMA combat sports community. I came up, the first professional mixed martial arts fight I ever seen, or first one period, was actually a Pride fight I seen on a DVD. And then I really became a hardcore fan because of the WEC, which at that time was on a cable network called Versus or something like that. But as long as you had cable, you got it for free. And their championship fights were not pay-per-view. And they took advantage of the fact that at the time the UFC didn't have lighter weight classes. In fact, they even got rid of lightweight for a time. I know, like, Jens Pulver was the champ. And I forget exactly how the succession went. It went from Jens Pulver to BJ Penn, and then they got rid of it. Or they got rid of it before BJ Penn, and then they brought it back for him. I forget, but if you're new to the sport, believe it or not, there was a time where the lightest weight class in American MMA was 170 pounds. So the WEC saw this little niche, this little path they could take, and they took it. And they developed fighters like Uriah Faber, and I mean Mike Brown, Carlos Condit, Cowboy Cerrone actually came from. I mean, there was just, the list goes on and on. Brian Stan, there was just great. It was a great organization, tons of fun. The UFC ended up absorbing it. But what I'm getting at is, contrary to what the UFC will have you believe, there's room enough for everyone. And I want more than anything for there to be a successful organization alongside the UFC. Maybe they're not quite as big. You know, the WEC, Strikeforce, they were never as big as the UFC, but they paid their fighters well, and in some cases, and in the case of Strikeforce, maybe a little too well, and it gave fighters other options. It gave them more power. And it made for more fights for us to watch. Instead of us, I mean, there's tons of MMA out now just because the UFC is putting on 40 cards a year. But a good portion of those cards are very weak. I'd much rather watch, a Bellator / PFL card that has Patricio Pitbull, Patchy Mix, and Francis Ngannou on it than I would some UFC Apex card with no crowd, right? So I think we can all agree with that. But getting to what they are actually doing, the product they're actually putting out, what yesterday's event really was, I was not impressed. It felt very Bellator-ish. It felt much like the cards from the organization that just went under, or was bought out, I should say. Granted, they're in Saudi Arabia, so, they had to go to where their bread is being buttered. I understand that. The crowd's going to be what it's going to be. It's not going to be a raucous UFC Mexico card in Mexico City with thousands of screaming fans. There's just a few rich dudes there clapping, but the fights didn't produce. Now, I understand it's not in their control so much that, maybe the three best fighters, certainly the three biggest names in the organization, weren't on the card at all in Francis Ngannou, Patchy Mix, and Patricio Pitbull. So, given that, they did the best with what they could, but there's still just a lot of little issues. The pacing between fights is like it takes forever. I'm fine with their style walkouts, with the pyrotechnics. It's kind of a throwback to Pride, whatever. I'm fine with that. But the pacing between fights. Now the commentary was pretty good. The team they had, they had Chael Sonnen out there with Dan Hardy, and I know oftentimes they'll have Randy Couture, and that's all good and well. It's just, and the stable of fighters aren't that bad, especially now that they're mixing the PFL and Bellator. Well, at least that's what they thought. Now they're saying, I don't even understand really what the goal is. They're going to keep them separate, and they're going to keep the PFL format where it's a season, which it is just terrible. No one understands it. No one understands the point system. It's so convoluted. Just scrap that whole idea. I get it. It was something they tried. It didn't work. Let's move on. So, absorb Bellator. That's fine. Maybe one thing Bellator did do that's different than the UFC that was a success is tournaments. Let's have tournaments. I'm all for that. Let's have a Grand Prix. Great. We'll have the weight class champion, then we'll have a Grand Prix champion. They can fight each other and make a champion. Okay, but it just seems like, I don't know, they're out of touch maybe? Do they not know that the PFL season is... That's one thing that any MMA fan will cite as a huge advantage to being an MMA fan. It's that there's no season. It's all year long. Once there's no Super Bowl, and then we have to wait all the way, 9 months or 6 months or however long it is for the season to start up again. That's a huge advantage of MMA. Why get rid of that? And then trying to make this point, I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring in traditional sports fans and make it more of a sport rather than watching an event that is a fight, But martial arts isn't just the sport. You can't make it into something it's not. Now, there are rules, and it's certainly not what it used to be, and no holds barred and all that stuff, and it is more of a sport, but it still has an essence about it that's because it's a martial art that makes it what it is. It's not to get too woo-woo about it, but it's just, there's something more. I understand they're trying to attract sports fans. I get that. Having a season and leagues and all this shit, it just doesn't work. It's been tried before. It's never worked out. But you don't need to do something crazy off the wall. How about we just start with owning a different day of the week? All right? We'll combine it into one organization. Keep the PFL name. People love three-letter organizations. That's fine. Professional Fighters League. Okay. Own Friday. All right? Friday night fights. We're not going to try and compete with the UFC and put our cards up against them on a Saturday night. We're going to own Friday nights. For all you MMA fans Who wants something to watch on Fridays? PFL's where it's at. And you know what? We're not going to make you pay $80 for a pay-per-view. And we got fighters like Francis Ngannou and Patchy Mix, who might be one of the best 135ers in the entire world, you know, and Vadim Nemkov and whoever else, you know. We got these guys, and hey, they train at the same gyms these other guys train with, and word on the street is, in practice, they're getting the better of them. You know what I'm saying, whatever it is. But we're not going to charge you $80 for a pay-per-view. We're going to, you know, have a monthly subscription or whatever like ESPN Plus, and our championship cards are going to be right on there, readily accessible, because we're fan-friendly. You know, I'm just throwing ideas out here, but this is what, you know, not a league, not, you know, and I'm not going to throw them under the bus for what yesterday was. They did the best with what they had. They try to come up with, you know, some different ideas. Okay, let's have the champs of the PFL fight the champs of Bellator, and they're going to be the champs of this new organization. They could have renamed it, rebranded it, you know. But keeping them separate, keeping the league format, I think it's a recipe for disaster. I don't see anything changing. I don't see them being successful. I mean, I am no, you know, mastermind businessman, but I'm a hardcore MMA fan, and I know what I like, and I know what has worked in the past, and I know what has scared the UFC in the past. You know, the WEC was scaring the UFC to the point where they had to, you know, get their shit together and buy them out, or they were really going to have a serious competitor. Now fighters coming up really do have other choices. So that's all I want to see, you know. And one championship is a whole different organ, you know, a whole different video, you know. But do what they're doing, you know. Well, like I said, that's a whole different video. They really are a combat sports organization where they have, you know, Muay Thai fights with 12-ounce gloves, and then they have Muay Thai fights with 4-ounce gloves, and then kickboxing fights, and then just grappling matches with some of the best jiu-jitsu fighters in the world. Then they have full-on MMA. It's, you know, it's very oriented towards the East, you know, the crowd in Singapore and stuff like that. But from, you know, the events they have put on in the U.S., I enjoyed watching it. I mean, I love combat sports, which if you're watching this channel, I'm sure you do too, you know. So, well, that was my thought on last night and this whole Bellator PFL thing. You know, let me know if there's a take on it that I missed that maybe you guys have, or something you saw, or an idea you think could benefit them. You know, we'll carry on the discussion in the comments. But like, subscribe, you know, hit the notification bell if this is, you know, you're here for the first time. I'd appreciate you leaving a comment or something. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. And yeah, until next time, go Bills.